We are live. Welcome everybody to Uncivilized Unplugged. If this is your first time, what a treat. You are on the #1 live podcast in the world, as voted for by my friend Sam, who's on this call. He's an official in this area. Thank you. We're here on Zoom, live audience, and you get to be a part of it. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Trevor Boehm, founder of the Uncivilized Movement, Uncivilized Nation, and the author of the books Today I Rise and Man Uncivilized. And we're going to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, because I think the CEO is on this call. Yes, indeed. Joe Sheehy, you want to wave to everybody? So this is all sponsored by a company called Cured Nutrition. And I'm going to do my best not to screw this up because he is listening. These guys make the best CBD products in the world. I was using them before they sponsored me. I know the CEO before they sponsored me. It's a great company. Now, why promote a company that does CBD? Because 2 or 3 weeks ago, they had a meeting and said, here's the deal. We're going to have to let a bunch of you go. We're not, the internet just took a shit and the world kind of went crazy. And the group of employees got together and said, you know what, let's not do that. We'll all take a pay cut and keep everybody in-house. So that's the kind of company they run. That's why I sponsor. That's why I let them sponsor me and promote them myself. So if you guys want, please go to curednutrition.com/uncivilized. You get a discount if you use the code uncivilized. All right, let's rock and roll. So again, those of you new to Unplugged, the frame of this, how I want it to feel, is that they're just two people hanging out on a couch, shooting the shit, talking about potentially life-changing things. And I have sat on couches with tonight's guest and shot the shit. We've sat in cars, we've sat on boats, we've sat in houses, we've sat on air mattresses on the floor and shot the shit about a lot of stuff. But mostly we talk about men because he's an expert at masculinity issues, men's issues, relationship issues, and now even more so, the shadow and the shadow around masculinity especially. So please give a very quiet but profound welcome to my very good friend and brother, Connor Beaton. Yeah, we do like weird spiritual hands here. The yoga community loves us. Yeah, it's coming. Awesome. Are you muted? Did I mute you? How did that happen? Hold on. I think I made it so people can't unmute themselves either. Where the hell are you? Oh, how are you muted? There, did that unmute you? There,
no. Yeah, there we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, Connor Beaton. We'll have that part edited out so we stay the #1 podcast in the world.
I like getting Cloud4 so much that I had to have it happen twice. It's just like a little bit of extra affirmation, so I'm good to go.
Amazing, brother. I could spend an hour giving your highlights, but how about answering this? One of my favorite questions is, what are you building?
Yeah, so I guess the simplest way to say it is I'm building an organization for men's health and wellness. So the Man Talks has been around for several years now. And, we started off doing events, but that has quickly traversed into other areas, content creation, teaching people how to do great relationships, teaching people how to find a deeper sense of purpose. So Man Talks does a bunch of things between, podcasts and weekends and coaching and all that kind of good stuff. But at the core of it, it is improving our ability to cultivate a deeper sense of self-leadership. That's really at the core of everything that I do is how do we lead ourselves more effectively?
I love it. And you and I had like an hour conversation, I think the other day, just on leadership, given what's going on in the world right now.
Yeah.
So we can shift to that real quick just to stay kind of local with what's happening. What are you most hopeful about with the virus situation? And what are you most scared about or most apprehensive about with this?
It's a good question. I think I'm most hopeful in our ability to like wake up a little bit to the fact that we're collectively connected. If what I've noticed most right now during the circumstance is like, this is a really interesting time in the sense that humanity collectively is experiencing largely the same thing. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't happen very often, if ever. So I'm hopeful for what will come out of this. I think, during very dark times, usually that births out some incredible projects and resources and ideas and collaboration. And so I think from that aspect, there is an immense amount of possibility that is present, uh, especially in these trying times, right? When you look at when some of the Fortune 500 companies have been built, it's almost always in recessions, right? It's almost always in these moments where it seems like things can't get any worse or we can't find a way out. And so that's what I'm hopeful for. What I'm the most concerned about is historically, and this doesn't really have much to do, but it might have everything to do with what we're talking about today. Historically, it's in these moments of chaos, that like collective chaos, that governments, people in power tend to try and use that chaos to accumulate more power, more control. And so, it's one of those things where people generally lose focus on what's happening externally when chaos is happening, because we get so focused in on, how do I just get through this? How do I survive? And, our central nervous system kicks in and we go into fight, flight, or freeze, and we're just doing whatever we can to try and survive. And so I'm the most concerned about people's civil liberties being taken away, people's privacy being taken away. And, I think that's if you watch some of the pieces that are sort of happening in different governments around the world, you'll actually see legislation trying to be passed to take away some of those civil liberties and to take away some of that privacy. So I think now more than ever, we actually need to be diligent in paying attention to what our local governments are doing and what our federal governments are doing wherever you are in the world, because they don't give them back. Right? They generally use these chaotic times to take civil liberties away and then don't give them back. So I guess that's a very high level thing. But I think it's a very important thing.
Would you say, and I agree with you, I definitely agree with you. Would you say that that's a shadow aspect of a government as a entity, or as governments as an entity, before we transition into shadow? I know we individuals have it, but would you say collective groups like that can have it as well? And is this that?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, governments, religions, they can all have their own shadow, right? A lot of the external structures and systems that we see within our society are manifestations of our internal projections, right? Like we build outside what we experience inside. And that's true in our relationships, in our businesses. It's true in many aspects of our lives. And governments and religions aren't exempt from that. So I think from a governmental standpoint, absolutely, there's a draw towards power, right? The shadow is always wanting more. It's always craving more power. It's always wanting more control, right? And so when you look at the systems that are in place, especially from a governing body, one of the biggest challenges that a lot of governments get into is that they are trying to find ways of accumulating and acquiring more control over the people. And it's usually couched as a good thing, right? It's like, if you hand over these civil liberties, it's great because we can help govern you about it. But it actually takes away freedoms and rights and liberties. So yeah, it's definitely a part of the sort of collective shadow of the government.
When did you start getting interested in the shadow as an idea or a concept? And actually, before you dive into that, can you, for people who don't know what that is, give a quick explanation in your view of what it is?
Yeah, for sure. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I just want to preface that, because I feel like anytime that you venture into this stratosphere, it's so easy to be like, "Oh, that sounds like conspiracy theory talk," and it's not. It's just historical data, right? You can look at the historical data of governments and the trajectory of when they have acquired more power and more ability to pass legislation without people's consent, and it always happens in moments of chaos. So the shadow is, from a psychological standpoint, the shadow is the part of our psyche that we hide all of the things about ourselves that we want to reject, that we want to avoid, that we don't like about ourselves. It is the place where we put our pain, our hurt, our insecurities, Generally, it's just this, I call it the hurt locker, right? It's like, it's the place where we put all the parts of ourselves that we don't want the world to see.
Mm.
And it's formed in these moments of it collectively throughout our life. It's formed in these moments where, people pick on us, or we get bullied, or we want love, but we get rejection. Maybe we grew up in a household where there was abuse or a lot of anger. And so it can be formed in those times. It can happen because we've been neglected in some way, shape, or form, or we failed. And so the shadow is built in our darker moments. And the interesting piece is that the shadow also fuels different players in our mind, right? Different players in our psychological game. So things like the inner critic that are constantly going and chirping away at us and telling that we're not good enough for the relationship or for the job or whatever we're trying to pursue in life. That inner critic is fueled by the shadow, right? And if you drill down on the inner critic, it has its own origin story, right? So for a lot of people, for example, a lot of the men that I've worked with that grew up in abusive households, when we start to dig in and I say like, hey, tell me about what your inner critic is saying. What does it sound like? What are the words that it uses? What are the phrases that it uses? When does it show up? And then how does that feel familiar, and who does that feel familiar to? Usually our inner critic is traced back to someone who was very critical of us. And so for a lot of men that experienced abuse, like from myself, I grew up in a household where there was verbal and physical abuse. And so when I started to do this work, I discovered that my inner critic sounded exactly like my stepdad, like exactly like him. The words that my inner critic would use, when it would show up, how it would show up, it was very much built out of that. So the reason why this is important, the concept of the shadow was designed by a psychologist by the name of Carl Jung. And he was kind of like the granddaddy of psychology. And he believed that we have, the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and then the unconscious. And in the unconscious mind, there is both a personal unconscious, so that's like all of your collective experiences that you've gone through individually. And then there's the collective unconscious. And he believed that we actually have access to the collective unconscious, which is the total conscious experience of everyone that's ever existed. And we won't go into that because it's a big rabbit hole. But within the personal unconscious resides the shadow. And if we don't start to heal these parts of us and integrate them, they will naturally control us. So when you are sabotaging, it's the shadow. When you're not getting the results that you're wanting, it's generally because the shadow is creating resistance. When you're getting reactive and lashing out at your partner or losing your shit on somebody in business or a client or something like that, that's the shadow coming up. So it's an incredibly, incredibly important aspect. And Jung believed that in order for us as human beings to reach any sort of wholeness, any sensation of feeling whole and complete, we had to embody the monster, right? We actually had to face our inner demon and start to incorporate it into our identity rather than trying to reject it.
Any questions? Told you guys he was good. How do you, a dude who just likes hockey and weightlifting, find the shadow and get into it? Like, what about it grabbed you as like, and I know you're not American, like a Canadian dude?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess the short version of it is like, I've always been fascinated with how we operate as human beings, mostly from a selfish place. So I hit rock bottom in my late 20s. I, had been living this really, what on the outside looked like a really great life. I had a great career. I had a great relationship. I had the car and the motorcycle and was traveling the world. And behind the scenes, I was just a complete disaster. Complete disaster. There was lots of infidelity. I was lying. I was cheating. I was manipulating. I was using sex as validation on a fairly regular basis, womanizing. And, it all came to a very sort of like cinematic, Hollywood style moment where I got busted. And it really like sent me into this spiral. And rather than sort of owning my shit and telling people what was going on, I tried to do what I'd always done, which was hide it. And so I lived out of the back of my car for a few weeks. I put all my stuff into storage. I lived out of the back of my car. And it ended up setting me on this path of trying to understand why I had done the things that I had done.
Yeah.
right? Because I had found myself in such a dark place, and I had basically lived this dual life, one of which people knew and saw, and the other people had no idea. And when I started to actually reconnect and own my part, and I started to reconnect with some of the men in my life, I started to find that a lot of us actually were living this way. That a lot of the men and women that I knew that were closest to me had this sort of like mask that they wore, and they presented the good parts of themselves, and they hid a lot of the important details. And it came to a head in a conversation with one of my best friends at the time that I'd gone to university with, where I sat down with him and I just told him everything. I sort of, emotionally and verbally puked on him and just said, like, here's all the stuff that I've been hiding, and here's all the ways in which I've been struggling. And he completely broke down, and he proceeded to tell me that he had tried to commit suicide a month and a half before. And I was not only heartbroken, but I was so shocked. Like, here was somebody that I knew, so I knew everything about them except for like the most important part. And I just started to see this over and over again in all my relationships and a lot of people's relationships, where they just felt the need to like hide parts of themselves. And those hidden parts wanted to be revealed so fucking badly, so badly that they would destroy their life just so that that part could come out and be seen, just so that that part could be integrated. And so that put me on this path. And I was fortunate enough to have a mentor in my life who had trained in Jungian psychology, who had actually done some mentorship with Carl Jung himself. My mentor has since passed away. He passed away quite a few years ago. But I spent 2.5 years learning Jungian psychology and archetypes and cognitive behavioral therapy and positive psychology, and like why we do the things that we do. And that was sort of the groundwork that sent me on this beautiful, wonderful journey that I am now on.
Amazing. And rumor has it you're going to have a book on this subject coming out at some point, huh? Some point
Yeah.
soon.
Yes. Yeah.
Amazing.
Just emailed the agent today to follow up.
Well, get me a copy.
Yeah.
And you and I talked a little while ago. You recently quit drinking, yeah?
I did. Yeah. So right
Can you
after.
talk about that decision and sort of what's come of it?
Yeah. So I stopped drinking actually about a year ago. That's interesting. Right after. So my wife and I got married April 6th last year. And she's a marriage and family therapist. She's incredible. But I was kind of feeling it leading up to the wedding, where I was like, I don't think I really want to drink anymore. I don't feel like this serves a purpose. Full transparency. There's people that are alcoholics in my family, and I've just watched them struggle so much. And after having worked with so many people and seeing the ever-present impact that alcoholism just has on so many families, I just didn't want to engage with it anymore. And I just didn't want it to be a part of my life. It has no place in my life anymore. And so, I had a couple of drinks over the course of that weekend. And then afterwards, just sort of let it go. And I didn't want to continue drinking, mostly because for a few reasons. One, I also wanted to see what I was capable of. I wanted to see, like, can I achieve more without this substance, without this crutch in my life? And honestly, like, I've never felt better. My body has never felt better. My mind is clearer. I don't have to worry about hangovers. I don't have to worry about, how I'm going to feel after having a few beers. And it is just this freedom that I've found. I think that a lot of us have crutches that we've relied on to escape processing things emotionally, or dealing with the hard times in our life, or the stress that comes along with, running a business or having kids or whatever the case may be. And one of the things that my mentor said to me early on in life that's taken me longer to actually integrate is that we never get rid of our coping mechanisms. They just evolve to actually support us. And I realized that my drinking was a coping mechanism that didn't support me.
Yeah.
Not that I ever had a problem with it, right? It was something that I would have a beer every once in a while when I'd go out for dinner. But I wondered who I would be and what I'd be capable of if that coping mechanism morphed into something that was more supportive rather than suppressive and repressive.
Wow. Beautifully stated. It's such a touchy topic. I think it's in the collective shadow lives a lot of alcohol's results and negative effects, and yet it's something that we accept as a group. And I don't have an issue or a problem at all with people drinking, but I'm curious if, given all of the facts of alcohol, how many people still would, of given the amount of domestic violence, assault, all DUI, all the things. Um, and like you said, how powerful it is to simply make the decision to see what life's like without it, especially as someone who's in the collective, right? You have
Yeah.
a business, you have a wife, you have friends, you go to parties, or you used to go to events, you all the things. Yeah, it's a fascinating experiment, for lack of a better term, to just walk away from it, especially if you don't have to,
Yeah.
right? That was
Yeah.
what I think was most interesting for me. I was like, I don't have to do this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I don't have to do this. And what I started to notice after I let go of drinking is how many people think that they do, right? It's a social agreement. One of the things that I've been talking about with COVID and with the coronavirus is like the reason why people are so panicked is that we have these social agreements of just basic things, right? Like when you go to the grocery store, there's an unspoken social agreement that there's going to be toilet paper there. And when that toilet paper isn't there, something happens in our body, something gets triggered in our body that says like, oh shit, am I not okay? Because
Right.
this social agreement isn't in place. And drinking is a social agreement that most people have just naturally bought into unless their religion or faith has imposed that on them. And so we need to challenge our own social agreements. What social agreements have you already bought into
Yeah.
that actually doesn't serve you, that doesn't align with the type of life, relationship, or business that you want to have? These Drinking is one of the unconscious social agreements that most people just sort of like in Alberta where I grew up, it's 18. The legal drinking age is 18, right? And so like you can go out and party and get fucked up at 18 and just have a wild time. And so from a very young age, drinking culture in Alberta, where I grew up, it's very prominent, right? It's what you do. And so it's part of the social agreement, and that it's just something that I've never questioned. So being free of it is just it's a wonderful gift, honestly.
Yeah, truly, truly. Think of how many social agreements are binding. And then I think one of the big fears right now, is you kind of nailed it, is anarchy is a complete disregard of all social agreements. It's you can't do that, but everybody's doing it. Driving on the wrong side of the road, going through red lights, not paying traffic tickets, taking 40 things of toilet paper, all of these kind of silent things that we go, oh, we just do that. But you're right, they're the iceberg down. Let's switch a bit, if we can, to purpose. You and I talk to a lot of nice guys, in quotes, or recovering nice guys, in quotes. And one of the big challenges I have for all nice guys is to find a deeper purpose, something that they will get validation from, so they don't have to get it from mostly women. When you talk to guys, especially nice guys, who are just starting the purpose journey, or even for people who are on this and going like, I just don't know what I want to do. How do you start to guide people, especially men, around purpose?
Mm. Hmm. Yeah, I mean, purpose is one of those sort of analogous things, right? It's like if you ask 100 people what purpose is, you'll get 100 different responses, right? Purpose is a very self-defined term. And so usually what I do in terms of starting with working with individuals around purpose, especially the nice guys, is to have them define what purpose actually looks like. What does purpose actually mean to you? Who have you seen in your life that has had purpose? Because for a lot of us, we're actually not able to identify people. I think about the family system that I grew up in, and that's where we get a lot of our information from. I think about the family system that I grew up in, and I had four parents. And when I really look at their purpose, none of them were really living the purpose that they wanted. And I think that's the case for most people, right? If you grew up in a home environment where you had a parent that was actually living their purpose, that's more rare.
Mm.
So one of the things that I would say is slow down and start to define what your version of purpose looks like. What do you want to have in it? Who's involved in it? Who are you impacting? And start to ask some of these value-based questions about what you want to create in the world, and how you actually want to show up. The second thing is that I always say that the purpose resides at the intersection of producing results that matter to us and providing gifts that fuel us. So we have to start to tune into, what are the gifts that reside within us? And a gift is very different from a talent. You might be innately talented at something, right? Like I have a degree in music and I was an opera singer for a while. I'm a talented singer, but it's not my gift, right? That's not my gift at all. I also don't derive a lot of purpose from being able to sing. What I do derive an immense amount of purpose from is the work that I do today. And my gift, which has revealed itself, is actually in facilitating transformation, actually facilitating shadow work with individuals. But it took me a long time to do that, right? So patience, right? Purpose requires patience. If you are pressuring yourself to have to find purpose tomorrow or within a week, it's going to be very challenging, right? Most of the people that I see living extraordinarily purpose-fueled lives have failed their way there, right? They have failed their way to purpose. They have tried over and over again to, it's almost like putting the bumpers up on the bowling alley, right? Like you put the bumpers up and you bounce the ball off a bunch of times and you find your way to center. You have to be willing to fail. And I think for most nice guys, they're not willing to fail. They need to be perfect right out the gates. And that's the same for nice women, right? There's a big group of women out there that want to be really nice and get it right and all those types of pieces. And when we do that, we're aiming for perfection and not purpose. And purpose doesn't reside in the realm of perfection. It's not interested in that, right? So we have to be willing to fail and let that failure actually inform the next step towards purpose. I know it sounds daunting. I know it can sound like, why would I want to just put myself in situations where I know I'm going to fail? But I guarantee you, like, that is part of the path. And it's what's gotten me to where I am today. And all of the men and women that I've worked with over the years that are purpose driven, in some way, they have failed their way there, and it's a humbling experience.
Beautiful. Just to share, Connor and I met, it was like about 2.5 years ago in a cafe in Manhattan, maybe 3 years ago. And I was trying to pick your brain on, like, what do I do with myself? I have all of these ideas. And you specifically said, you've got to pick one and you've got to go all in on it. And I was like, okay. That afternoon, I changed my Instagram. I was like, I'm a divorce coach. I'm just going to work with people getting divorced. And I went to a workshop like 3 weeks later and was telling everybody, I'm a divorce coach. And every time I did that, I got a little tummy ache. Like, and came home and was like, you know what? I want to work with men. And we'll throw in there that it was the scariest proposition. And I think there's usually something around that with purpose. It's the I would, but thing. Like, there's no money in this. No one wants to be a men's coach. Why the hell would I want to work with a bunch of dudes all day? Oh, it's the most fulfilling thing I could find. My voice came from it. It works. I'm great at it. It's service oriented. Is it challenging? Sure. So I'd say, to add into that too, ask yourselves, folks, like, who are grappling with this question, what is the, yeah, but not that? It's like the thing that's so often, yeah, but not that, but it's that.
Can I add one thing?
Sure.
One of the things that I tell almost all my clients in this is what feels the most right now. What feels the most right now, and then execute the shit out of that, right? Yeah. Execute absolutely 100% towards that, and that will inform where you move next, right? So, like, I started off Man Talks doing speaker series. And that was what I knew in that moment was the most right in that moment. And that decision to go all in on that informed everything else that happened. And we don't even do those speaker series events anymore, right? Yeah. So, but the business has grown exponentially from that birthplace. And so, just focus in on going all in on what is the most right now.
Did your podcast come out of the speaker series, or did you have that first?
So I did not have the podcast first. In fact, I started the podcast. This is a little bit of a funny story. I'll tell this really quickly. So,
Go for it.
a guy came to one of the Man Talks events, and he was this executive for a marketing company here in Vancouver. And he asked me to go grab a coffee, and we chatted. And he was like, "I love what you're doing. I want to support." And he's like, "I have some ways that I think would help you." And I was like, "Okay." And he said, I think you should start a podcast, and I think I should be your co-host." And so this is my buddy Roger, who actually started the podcast with me. And admittedly, wait for it, I had never listened to a podcast before in my life when I started the podcast. I had no interest in interviewing. I had no interest in doing the podcast. I didn't even know how to download a podcast. Like, I just had zero knowledge about it.
Yeah.
But this guy who I built a little bit of a relationship with, he was just so adamant on it, and he was so passionate about it. And I was like, well, like, he seems to know, and so let's do this. And so, like, he's no longer with the organization, and we parted ways. He actually, two more funny things. One, he actually runs a podcast development company now. So out of our work together, he found his purpose.
Amazing.
Two, I have like well over 1 million downloads now. Like, I think we're close to like 1.5 million downloads on the podcast.
How many episodes have you done?
I think like 300 almost.
Wow. Yeah, this is how, just so you guys know, I met Connor because he interviewed me for his podcast.
Yeah.
So for those thinking about purpose too, I would love do you know the invisible step theory? You ever heard about that?
Yeah.
It's like everyone wants to get the next step, but the next step isn't the step. There's this invisible step that you're going to take. Connor's going to start a speaker series, that's the step that leads to the podcast. The podcast leads to this whole incredible organization, which leads you to getting grown men to sit on the floor and cry their eyes out and work through their shit in front of a group of other men and make fucking magic, which I've watched countless times. So I hope we just nailed. Any questions on purpose? No? Good. All right, moving on. Here we go, brother. Well done. I did promise two guests or two listeners, two Instagram people, that I would ask you these very specific questions. Folks, I know we're switching gears quick here, but we're talking relationship, Connor. How do you recommend someone who's eager for love stay in like the slow, like it's okay, we don't have to dive all the way into it, kind of vulnerable, explorative state when they're starting a relationship? This could be either a man or a woman.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say get to know your relationship with needing to go quickly, right?
Ooh, say more about that. Wait a minute. You just dropped, like, people are furiously taking notes right now.
Yeah, get to know your relationship with needing to go quickly. For me, what I've noticed is that anytime we have a need, not a need of like this keeps me safe, but like almost like a neediness quality to it. It's trying to protect us from something, and trying to protect a part of us that needs healing, trying to protect a part of us that doesn't want to be seen, right? And so just notice that necessity for wanting to go quickly. What does it say about you, right? Maybe for you, by going quickly, there's a part of you that thinks you'll be able to lock them in. Or maybe you've bought into some Disney version of love that tells you that you need to fall in love within the first couple dates, right? And it needs to be this magical freaking carpet ride garbage. And like, that's not realistic for most relationships, right? And so get connected to that. Secondly, I would say, what does that need to move quickly in your relationship actually say about you, right? What's your relationship with needing to move quickly in all the rest of your life? I think one of the things that I've learned is, like, I don't really like the saying, but I'll throw it out there anyway. How we do one thing is how we do all things.
Yeah.
And while I think that that's not always the case, I think sometimes in dating, especially with this, that it's sometimes indicative of our inability to slow down. So what's your relationship to actually slowing down? Are you scared of being used? Are you scared of, right? Like, get in touch with some of the fear or the anxiety that you have. Are you scared of being judged? Are you scared of someone not committing to you? Are you scared of being not enough. I think that's one of the biggest things that I've seen with people that want to move very quickly in a relationship. They're terrified that the other person will find out something about them or learn something about them, or that they're not going to be good enough. And so I need to lock this person down immediately. So enjoy. One of the things that stuck with me about what my wife Vienna said, we were doing a workshop one day and someone asked a very similar question, and she probably answered like way better than I just did. But all she said was, find the victory in the journey, right? Find the victory in going slow. How can you learn, grow, and expand by moving in that space slowly? And the last thing that I'll say, I promise, is learn from the wisdom of your own insecurity, because there's an insecurity that's driving your need to want to go quickly. And that insecurity needs to be looked at, it needs to be healed, it needs to be understood. And you need to sit with that part of yourself, right? If you think about your insecurities as like little kids all vying for your attention, those things need to be looked at, spoken to, integrated, and healed. Otherwise, they're going to keep showing up and wreaking havoc on our relationships.
For people that don't really understand what you mean by sit with, be with, dialogue with, can you give just some real world, like, okay, bro, I'm super insecure. I'm sitting with it. What does this mean?
Yeah. So first off, identify the insecurity, right?
Okay,
That's
name it.
step number one. Name it. Name the insecurity. Second thing, try and trace the origin story. And you can literally write down the origin story of my insecurity is. That's a really, really great prompt. Or the origin story of this insecurity is. And then secondly, ask yourself the question, what is this insecurity trying to teach me? Right? If there was a lesson, if this insecurity was a teacher, what lesson would this insecurity be trying to teach? And someone said, invite that baby to dinner. Yeah. Yeah. Invite that little insecurity baby to dinner, right? So that's what it looks like to sit with it. You literally allow the insecurity to inform what's happening, right? So if you feel insecure about somebody leaving you, right? That could be a good example of like somebody leaving you in a relationship. What is that insecurity trying to teach you? What probably is trying to teach you that you are lacking self-worth and that you're not valuing what you bring to in the relationship. And so you're over indexing the other person. You're creating a one up, one down position in the relationship. And that's what a lot of people do, right? It's like, I need you to love me. I need you to move really quick in this relationship so that it reinforces that I'm good enough to be here. And we all have these like weird indicators of what puts us on equal playing footing in relationships.
I love it. Thank you. That was huge. Huge. Take a breath. I got another good one for you. So this was written by a man, but we can use it as male or female. In these times, how do you keep the spark going in a relationship with someone you're not living with? So someone there's now you're distanced, or you could be in a different city. Like, what does this poor guy do to keep this woman interested in him?
Yeah. So is it just sexually, or is it just like within the relationship?
Let's say both.
Okay. So I think overall, deploy a bit of spontaneity. I think that is going to be very, very key, right? Because we can get into these routines of like, oh, I'll text you before bed, or, oh, like we talk every night on FaceTime, and that can just get monotonous and boring. So execute with a bit of spontaneity, right? Allow yourself to send a random text message, send some random flowers, right? Keep your partner on their toes, not knowing what to expect. It's such a beautiful, beautiful gift, and get to know how they want to be loved, right? I think if you can inquire with like, what makes you feel the most loved? Every single person should ask their partner that. What makes you feel the most loved, right? And then start to implement a little bit of that in the relationship. I think sexually, probably you can play around with, whatever you're comfortable with. You could get into, you can send photos and videos and stuff like that. You can do some, video sex chats, but you can also get a little bit more exploratory with it, right? You can create an experience where how vulgar can I get on your show?
Dude, it's me. What do you think?
Yeah, okay. So, for example, like you could create. So I'm gonna go sexually here in just a second, but like you could create a date night, right? And sit down and have a date, and you plan the whole date. Maybe you watch a movie together. Maybe you play a game together, right? There's a multitude of things that you can do. I think sexually is where we normally get stuck when we're not together. So you can do things like lead each other through a sexual fantasy. So what that can look like is you say, okay, babe, maybe you plan it out. Maybe you say like, okay, 7 o'clock, I'm going to call you, get ready. We're going to have some fun. We're going to play. Okay, great. So then you call and you guide your partner through a very specific experience. So it's like, okay, go into the room, take your clothes off, get into bed. And then you walk your partner through a whole sexual fantasies, right? So put your earphones in, turn all the distractions off, turn the lights off, light some candles, and you help them set the scene. And then you guide them through a sexual fantasy that you know they'll enjoy. And you tell them to get off, you tell them to masturbate, and you guide them through that whole sexual experience. So that can be something really fun and exciting to do with a partner. Simply because, especially if you're stuck apart, it's a great way to engage one another and have your partner feel sexually prioritized.
Beautiful. Dare I say, fuck them with words. Is that what
Yeah,
you're saying?
fuck them
Yeah.
with words is
Amazing. Amazing.
exactly what I'm saying. Yeah.
Get that t-shirt out pretty soon.
Yeah.
Appreciate that, brother. Uh, Last question isn't from the listeners, but I'm going to ask them all. I'm going to personally ask it on behalf of everybody that knows you and knows that you're married to the top marriage and family therapist in New York City. So groundwork, you're a black belt, she's a black belt. When you guys argue, I just have this idea that it's one of two things. It's either like you're throwing feces at each other, or it's like the most beautifully eloquent, like my family history from back now is being triggered and this beautiful, and you're like, oh, I'm holding you in this way. How the fuck do you guys fight? Tell me about it.
This is so good. Yeah, I mean, yes, we definitely still argue. Sometimes it's kind of a bit of both. There's never any feces involved, thankfully. Um,
Yes.
but sometimes it's very eloquent and it's very understanding, and it's almost like what you would expect two therapists to be doing, right? It's like, look, I think that comes from this part of your family system, and are you projecting onto me? And we can actually move through very complicated issues like very quickly. Other times, depending on the wound that's been triggered within us, someone might get reactive. And for us, the breakdown normally happens just like every single couple at the end of the day, after a very long and stressful day, when we have been overtaxed in our decision making, when we have been overtaxed in tasks and to-dos and all that kind of crap. So I would say probably like 80 to 90% of the time, we have very grounded conflict, right? And so it's not yelling, it's not arguing, it's like, tell me how you're feeling, tell me what's going on inside of you, what's the story that you're telling yourself about what I did, etc. The other like 10 to 20% of the time, I mean, it's heated, right? It's heated. We're both stubborn as fuck. I might be one of the most stubborn people that you have ever met in your life, ever, guaranteed. And my wife is so I'm the oldest of 5, and I'm used to having my way. And she is an only child, and she's used to having her way. And so, so every once in a while, we will just lock horns like nobody's business. But it's all respectful. It's never like crossing a line into throwing things or becoming verbally abusive or anything like that.
Yeah.
But every once in a while it gets super fired, and it's just like, you know what? I don't want to fucking do this right now. Like I'm leaving the house. I'm going to the bedroom, or something like that. So we definitely still get fiery, but it comes from that stubborn part.
I love it. Thanks for sharing that, man.
Yeah, man.
If you could give everybody listening, and especially people who are stuck at home with a partner that may be dealing with some conflict, what's the one piece of advice you would recommend, especially for men, to keep the conflict respectful and keep it safe?
Yeah, I think read Nonviolent Communication. It's an amazing book that will give you more insight than I can give you in a soundbite here. But that's definitely a great place to start. But in terms of what I would recommend is Can I give you three parts to it?
Please.
Okay. So first is ownership. You need to own your part in it, right? And that might mean owning your emotional state. What I see a lot of guys do is they try and resolve conflict when they're at like an 8 on the anger scale. And then they wonder why their partner's like, well, I don't accept your apology because you seem pretty pissed off and you're saying, I'm sorry. It's like, yeah, don't just own your shit, right? Don't just own your words or your actions, own your emotional state, right? So make sure you're coming from a place of grounded, calm, and peace. That might mean that you need to, just pause for a few before you can come back in and engage in the conversation and resolve the conflict. The second thing is, stay grounded. Practice appreciation, all right? So outside of the conflict, one of the things that we don't do is share appreciation for our partner in how we engage in conflict. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but you want to start to point out how your partner and how you show up in conflict in a healthy, positive way. We normally obsess and fixate on how we show up negatively in conflict, and we want to start to rewire that. Otherwise, we're just going to fixate on what's not working. And then I think the last piece is going to be seek understanding. If you can do none of those other things, and you just seek to understand what's happening in your partner's experience, how they're feeling, why they're upset. And that might sound like, tell me the story that you're telling yourself about what I said or what I did or what happened at work or what happened with your family. That's a really powerful question, and just seek to understand why he or she feels so threatened. And that's such a great question, right? Like why you feel threatened, or what's causing you to be so reactive right now? What do you need me to know? I think a really, really powerful question that I give most men to ask in those moments is, tell me what you think I have not understood yet. Tell me what you think I have not understood yet. Because so often I literally just saw most of the women be like, yes. But for what we miss out on is that when we're in conflict, men, we speak and listen for what the point is, right? So if we think that we've got the point from you, we're like, my job here is done. And we can miss out on a whole bunch of context for what's going on in our partner's experience. So sometimes just asking the question, tell me what you think I haven't understood yet, can reveal what our partner's experiencing and help us move closer to resolution.
Beautiful. Think of how much conflict there's going to be right now due to people being in stressful situations. And if just given the tools you gave, how much challenge you're going to save, how much heartache you're going to save, how much stress, how many fights kids aren't going to have to watch. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And don't fight in bed.
Amen.
Get out of bed. Don't fight in bed. Set the one rule. It's a cardinal rule. Don't fight where you fuck.
T-shirt number 2 coming up.
That might be my t-shirt. I don't know, Trey.
Awesome. Let me ask you a personal question. This audience and everybody who listens to this number 1 podcast is quite elite. And so we have a lot of clout, we have a lot of network, we have a lot of people in our lives. And as a way of appreciating you, if there's something that someone on this call or listening to this podcast could help you with or give to you, what would it be?
I think probably the biggest resource that I could use right now is, just full transparency, probably building a sales funnel.
If someone knows how to build a sales funnel,
I don't know. Should I just be stupidly practical? I'll give some context, right? It's we've put out a couple courses and they've done incredibly well.
Yeah.
And we've had an immense amount of success, but I don't know the first thing about building any sort of funnel. And so we've always just winged it and it's been great. And so I don't even know if we need support, but it's the first thing that popped into my head. So
that was perfect.
There we go.
Someone else said don't use single-use plastics. Someone said adopt a puppy, and you need a sales funnel.
I took it very personally. this is the selfish part of me that was like,
no. Trust me. If it was reversed, I'd be like, send me bacon. What are you guys, are you kidding me? Send me bacon.
I mean, I do like bacon. I feel like some back bacon would be pretty good.
You're gonna get inundated with like sales info and pork products, and I'm gonna be so damn happy. Connor, how do people get more of you in their lives? How do they find you? How do they find the programs you're running with V, the courses, etc.? How do we get more Connor Beaton?
Yeah, so easiest way is on Instagram. It's just at mantalks, MANTALKS. And then my website is connorbeaton.com. Those are probably the two big access points. And then, the Man Talks podcast. You should definitely go listen to Trevor's episodes. He's got a couple of them and he crushes it every single time.
Thank you. And we have one that we just recorded together, kind of freestyle, yeah? Coming out pretty soon.
Yeah, man.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, for your generosity, for your expertise, and truly just for your presence in my life as a man, as a mentor, as an inspiration, as someone I can call and go, I don't know what the fuck's going on. I need help, or send memes to. So I love you. Thank you for joining us. On behalf of everybody here, thank you for joining us. And for you all, thank you for coming, giving your time, watching us kind of fuck our way through this. And I hope you learned something. If you want to get your hands on my book, my goal is still to sell 10,000 of them this year to get them into men's hands. And that's manuncivilized.com/the book. If you're listening to this on iTunes, please give us a rating. And also go to Cured Nutrition. Check those guys out. Amazing products. And stay safe, stay open, take care of each other, and please stay healthy. Thank you. Mwah. Love you, brother. See you, Connor.
Ciao.